Hello, my name as always is Michael Creek, and you are here in the Max MSP In A Nutshell series to build an oscillator for your awesome modular synthesizer. If you just landed here by random chance and you don't know what I'm talking about, check out this video up above, which is going to explain why we're doing all of this. Because this is going to be part of a modular environment, I want to patch this as a potential B-patcher. The B-patcher object is an object that lets you load in other patchers, and they're going to be sub-patchers for your max patch, and they are going to have a panel as a user interface. So whatever you put in the top left corner of your B-patcher, once you recall it inside of this window, you're going to have your very own B-patcher, and it's going to have some inlets and some outlets possibly. So let's talk about the grand structure of this module. We will probably want a few inlets, and in your B-patcher, those are actually called inlets. It's this nice, funny object. We need a few of those, and in the later B-patcher, they will be ordered in their position from left to right. So this is going to be inlet number 1, and this is going to be inlet number 2. The funky thing about Max 7 is that as long as you are designing your B-patcher and it's not actually inside of another patch, you won't see which inlet has which number because they all just have this I for inlet. But if you open the same B-patcher later in your finished patch, then you're going to have a 1 here and a 2 here and so on. And I think we're going to want at least 3 inlets. The first one being the frequency of the oscillator, which is going to be provided by our key module. The second one is going to be the frequency modulation inlet. Frequency modulation is basically vibrato, so it changes the pitch of your oscillator by whatever goes in there. And then the third inlet is going to be character, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's a very fuzzy term, and I kind of coined it, so it's probably not even a real word in synthesis, but it is, I think it's based upon the SH101 synthesizer. It just means that for some waveforms, we can do some minor adjustments to the waveform by changing the character. For example, for a sine wave, we're going to do a little bit of feedback. For the triangle wave, the max triangle object has a nice way of shaping this triangle into a sawtooth or an inverted sawtooth. And for a pulse wave, of course, we can have the pulse width, which is a classic thing to modulate. Hey, yeah. So that's our inlets. For outlets, I think we mainly need 1 for the moment, which is just going to be our signal outlet. There is not the need for anything else particularly. Yeah, I think so. Okay, so this is going to be our signal out. Oh, whoops, sorry. All right. Now today we're gonna take care about the waveforms that we have and about the frequency inlet and probably the FM inlet as well. So we want to have different kinds of waveforms available to this oscillator, which means that we're gonna have different oscillators producing sound all the time, and then we're just going to select the one that is picked by a user interface object, and I think we're gonna start with that. A nice user interface object is called live.tab. You can see live.tab is kind of a graphical selection device, and when you check its first outlet, you can see that everything that you click has a numerical number. Now open your inspector by hitting Command I. There is a few things I like to check or uncheck. First of all, don't allow multiple lines. I don't know who made this. It's atrocious. Don't ever do it. So if you basically, if you disable it, you have your free reign to make your buttons big and lovely. And as long as this is, oh my God, look at this. It's so horrible. No, don't do this. Okay, so this is one thing. Then the next thing is we're going to have our range or enumeration, And I think there's going to be 5 or 6 waveforms. We're going to go with sine wave, which is not classical synthesis because sine waves were not so easy to produce with electric circuits. We're going to have the triangle, the sawtooth, the pulse wave, and the noise as well. So we're going to have 5 different possibilities to select. Down in the Live tab inspector, you will find the option to check use pictures, and now you just need to know some image files. I think it accepts SVG files or PNG files as well. I think you can check it somewhere. And luckily in the Max search path there is already a nice library of images that are from the Ableton Live core data. So for sine wave we can just say sine.svg. For sawtooth, I think it's called up.svg. I think we're going to have this sawtooth. Triangle is up down. Pulse wave is called square or rect or pulse. I'm going to have to check this. Up down.svg. So if you want to find out what is in your library, just hit your spotlight, search for up down SVG and say open it in its folder, and you're going to see it's actually the Max for Live Picts folder. And in there we have like all these nice PNGs and SVGs. And you know, when I make my own like this one, I always stuff them in there as well. So you can feel free to make your own little objects. And the thing we're looking for is square. So back here, we're gonna have those 3, then square.svg, and I think random. No, it's a noise. Let's see. It was random after all. Yay! See? Those look familiar to you? I bet they are. So now we already have our nice user interface object to select a waveform. Now all we need is the actual waveforms. And for that, there is an object. You know, we are working with audio, so we need a different set of objects, and the object we're looking for is selector. Selector is an object that has several inputs, and you define them with the first argument. We need 5, and we're going to initially open the first one, and there you go. Now you can see there is the first inlet that is actually the one that routes everything. And then you have here the 5 inlets that we requested, and here the 1 outlet. And the 1 stands for which one is initially open. So 1 means this one should be open. Yep, and it is. Okay, now to open a gate, you send an integer. And what happens is 0 closes all the gates, 1 opens the first gate, 2 opens the second, and so on. Since we never really want to close all the gates off, that is not something we need to worry about. But when you see, when we select our first waveform, we get a 0. So all we need to do is just add 1 to this. Super easy. And now, whoops, and now when we select this here, you can see that we get 1 through 5, which is exactly what we want. Get it in there, and you're done. Now for some waveforms, the first one was a sine wave, which is called cycle tilde in Max speak. Then you have the sawtooth. I think you can call it just saw. There's also the phaser, but the phaser tends to have more sound artifacts in it. The triangle object is try. The square object is called rect. And for the random, we can just take, you know, noise. All right. So now we have our different waveforms. What these would actually need is a frequency. To get the frequency, we have an input here. And in this input, I think we already want to have hertz. So we are going to just take this frequency, we're going to add 0 to it for a reason it's going to be clear later. And then this can go directly into the first inlets of all those objects, except for noise, because noise doesn't need any kind of frequency. And this is going to be the way that we can determine the frequency of our waveforms. Now, we have an FM inlet, and FM, also known as frequency modulation, means that we want LFOs or envelopes or even other oscillators to be able to modulate the frequency of our oscillator here. So the one problem we have is that for the purposes of this modular synthesizer we are building, every inlet and every outlet should be moving in a range between 0, 1 and 1, because that is what we defined to be the limits of our control voltage. So everything that goes in here is going to be somewhere between -1 and 1. So if we just check this in here, we would have the following problem. The frequency would be actually modulated, but only by a maximum of 1 Hertz. So it's a very slight vibrato. And we want it to be less subtle. So what I like to do is have a relative modulation based on the frequency that you're actually playing. So that means we get a frequency in here, and we multiply it. And also we need to use the signal multiplication for 2 reasons. The main reason is that, as I said, everything we're sending here is going to be control voltage, and that means it's signal anyway, so we will be able to put the output of this oscillator in there as well. And the benefit that signal has over non-signal data in Max is that signal is constantly checked, like 44,100 times per second probably, which is your sampling rate. Whereas if you had your normal multiplication, this would only ever be checked when you send something in the left inlet, which in this case would lead to us having to do some more workarounds, but we don't need that. So every time something comes in here or something comes in here, and basically 44,000 times a second, this one gets output. And as you can see, what we get out of here is signal, so we would also need this to be signal, which is lucky because all of those waveforms accept signal as a frequency input. So now when we hook this up, you see that you get a frequency, for example, 500 Hertz. And you see that 500 is going to be the left inlet of this addition. And then this 500 gets modulated by a signal from 0 to 1, or -1 to +1. And that is going to be multiplied by 500. So you get -500 to +500. And then 500 Hertz are added or subtracted from our original frequency. So we actually go down all the way, which is, it's a bit too much actually, but anytime you want to modulate this stuff, I think you're going to put an amp in between there anyway. So this is only going to be an issue if you put the intensity to 100%, and everything below that is just going to add slighter vibratos. So we're set with the frequency and the frequency modulation. The output of this could go straight to our signal output, but we're going to do something about that later. And I think for science's sake, let's check this out for a moment. So we hook up this as a substitute for our frequency. I don't think we're going to do any modulation as of yet, but we can do so as well. And now we need a DAC. And then let's add a live.gain in between so it's not going to be super loud. Okay, set this gain to, set this gain to a reasonable level. Activate it. choose a frequency, and you can see this is our cycle. Sawtooth, triangle, pulse wave, and noise. So it works. Now there is one thing you might have noticed, which is the following. I don't know if you hear it, but there is a slight popping sound every time you change the oscillator. And that is because there is a jump in the waveform, which makes sense because, for example, your pulse wave might be in its oscillation and be at maximum right now, and then you change to triangle, which at the same time is maybe somewhere on the way between 0 and 1. And so your waveform coming out of here is suddenly cut and makes a jump, and jumps in the waveforms are what generate clicks, and you want to avoid clicks because clicks are just another word for lazy programming. So how do we get rid of those? We need to make the audio super soft just when you hit this button, and then get it back to normal volume again in no time. And for that, what we're going to do is we're going to check if the output here is changing by adding a change object. And whenever a change happens, there's going to be a bang at the leftmost outlet. And whenever this bang is happening, we want to do the following. This is going to make sense in just a bit. I think it's like this. Yeah. We use the line tilde object. The line tilde generates linear audio ramps, and by hitting this message, you tell the line you go to 0 in 20 milliseconds, and then you go back to 1 in 20 milliseconds. So that means whenever you hit this button, it's going to take 20 milliseconds to fade out, and then 20 more milliseconds to fade in. And to make this super pedantic, I think we're also going to pipe the message that we're sending by 20 milliseconds. This one here. Which means that whenever you change your waveform, there's going to be a number sent out here, and it's going to wait in the pipe for 20 milliseconds. During this time, this signal ramp goes to 0. Then when it's at 0, we change the waveform, which might lead to a click, but we're not going to hear it because right now our audio is multiplied by 0. And then we're going to ramp it back up to 1. So as you could hear from my description, what we are still lacking is a multiplication tilde object, which starts at 1. And we're going to add the output of this line here. And we're going to... Oh no, it's horrible. We're going to take this like this. So now, whenever you change the waveform, you shouldn't be able to hear the click anymore. Let's try this out. See? Perfect. All right. Now this is almost all that we need for our oscillator. We're going to do one more trick, which is going to be the character. And this might, in comparison to the other parts, take a little while, because depending on your waveform, it's kind of a different beast. So the sawtooth has nothing specific that I would like to change with the character for now. It might be interesting to create SUPERSAWs by changing the character, but we're going to do that in the future. The triangle, however, has a natural input that lets you move its peak, which means like if you give the second input, I think. Yeah. If you give the second input a 0.5, it's going to be a perfect triangle. And then when you move closer to 0, it's going to more and more become a sawtooth. And when you move it to 1, it's going to become an inverted sawtooth. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the character input, which as everything moves between -1 and 1, and we're going to scale it to 0 to 1. So what can we do? I think yeah, what we're going to do is to the input, we add 1, which means now our character input is scaling from 0 to 2. And then we divide it by 2, which means now we have an input that goes from 0 to 1, and that we're going to add in here. And funnily, you can also add this in here, because for the rectangle, for the square wave, the duty cycle is, at least in Max, the pulse width. So let me show you real quick. We're going to need a scope object anyway. Scope is a oscilloscope, which shows you the waveform, in contrast to the spectroscope, which is a spectral scope, so it shows you frequencies. Now we're going to take the output of a waveform, and you can see now that it's kind of messy already. When you reduce the frequency, it gets a little bit better, but not by much. Only if you go to the subaudible range, you can see that it's actually sine waves. Now I would like to kind of try and make this a bit more easily visible, and there is some parameters in the scope that can help you with that. There is the buffer size and the calculation count. And I always mess this up. Let's try this again. The calculation count is how many samples are represented in one horizontal pixel, and the buffer size is how many samples do you take into the buffer before you output something. So if you decrease the buffer size, you're going to get something that is very accurate but also very wildly moving, as you can see. This is very good for very slow oscillations, as you can see like here. Now we can actually follow the whole duty cycle of the sine wave, but we can't really see its sine wave unless we already know how they look like, kind of. So we're going to need to check with this parameter in a little bit, and also the calculation count. So when we decrease the samples per millisecond, we get a broader view of the waveform. And I always kind of like to take this into a relation as far as it goes, because unfortunately those two variables have a definite maximum, which maxes out very quickly. But think of it like this. This thing is right now, I think, 130 pixels wide. Yeah. So I can change this to be 150 pixels. Okay, let's do this. And right now, every pixel is representative for 100 samples. What we would like to see, ideally, is, let's say, we want to see 2 duty cycles, so 2 complete oscillations of the waveform at any time. That changes the calculation count depending on your frequency and your sampling rate. So in this case, it means the following. You can get your sample state by hitting the DSP state tilde object. And I think when this patch is created, and also whenever you bang it, you get your current sampling rate out of this second outlet. So we're going to have a message here. We're going to send it a bang, and you can see it's 48,000 for me. So we want to take this into account. This is the samples in 1 second. Now we also need the frequency of this oscillator. And for that, I like to make variables anyway. So we're going to do, not variables, I'm sorry, like send and receive objects. Oh my god, we need to talk about something else now. Oh, there's so much going on. So, in the end, I think we're going to send and receive a lot of stuff with these objects, because as you can see here, it already is getting kind of messy, and once you start adding more bells and whistles to your oscillator, there's going to be a lot more to worry about. So what we do is we use send tilde and receive tilde, which allow you to, without any kind of wires, transmit stuff from here to everywhere in this patcher or in other patches, which is actually a problem, because remember when we talked about how useful it is to be able to copy and paste all your modules all over again? This gets really problematic once you use send tilde, because if you just did it like this and said like send tilde frequency, then this would be fine as long as you use one oscillator. But as soon as you copy it, you suddenly have two objects that send data to the same receive objects, because those work across different patchers in your same project. So what we need to do, it's very simple. Hashtag. You go send hashtag 0 minus frequency. And now what you get is whenever an instance of this patcher is loaded, this hashtag 0 is going to be replaced by a random number seed that Max generates. So now you can copy this as oftentimes as you want, and you're gonna get send and receive objects that don't interfere with each other. And where there is a send, there's also a receive. So now we get the frequency here as well. So you think of it like this. The frequency is the number of oscillations per second. Now, if we want to have two duty cycles shown in this oscilloscope all the time, we need to put those two into relation from each other. And it works like this. So your frequency is the number of oscillations per second. That's great. That means if you divide 1 by your frequency, you get the number of seconds per oscillation, because you switched the upper and the lower side of your calculations. So what you do is exclamation mark divided by 1 point. The exclamation mark means that you change the two positions of your operators. I'm sorry, I don't know calculus in English. It's so hard for me. I'm very sorry, internet. So if you did it like this, this means you divide whatever comes out of here by 1. And if you put an exclamation mark in front of it, it means you divide 1 by whatever you get out of there in the left inlet. And of course, this also needs to be signal, because we're working with signal all the time. All right, so let's check this out. We take a number tilde object to monitor what's coming out of here. And now we change the frequency to something. And we also send this in here. And this doesn't work because this is not frequency. So we go sig tilde on this bitch. All right. So you can see with a frequency of 10 Hertz, it takes 0.1 seconds for one oscillation, which makes sense. Whereas with the frequency of 1 Hertz, it takes exactly 1 second. Okay, so this works. Now, we know that 1 second consists of 48,000 samples. So all we need to do is multiply this number by 2, because we want to see 2 duty cycles, and then multiply it by the number of samples per second. So for example, if we had a frequency of 1 Hertz, it would mean that we multiply this by 2. This is 2 Hertz then, and then we multiply this by 48,000. So this would mean that we see 2 times 48,000 samples, which is 2 seconds, which is 2 duty cycles of this waveform. And then also, because this thing here works per pixel that you display, and we have a 150 pixels, we would divide this by 150. So, to sum it up, multiply it by 2. Come on, 2. Don't forget the points. Bam. Multiply this with each other. So is this, this is not signal. Whoopsie daisies, come on, what's this? But luckily you can also put normal numbers in your multiplications with a tilde, and then divide this by the number of pixels you have in your horizontal level here. And don't forget, again, that we're working with signal all the time. And now what we get out of here is a signal, so we need to convert this back into a non-signal by using snapshot 20. Snapshot 20 takes a snapshot of your waveform every 20 milliseconds. And then this is going to be our calculation count, which is called, you can hit up this to show the attribute name, calc count. So what we do is we send a message, calc count, and $1. And then this we send in here, and this we send in here. So now, oh, look at it. It's 2 cycles, kind of. And when we change the frequency, you can see that those cycles are moving faster, but they are still 2 cycles. And then at some point it maxes out, and then it's gonna get more cramped, as you can see here now. But, you know, for the most part, it's kind of better like this. So you can see now, whatever we do, it looks kind of funny, but at least you can see the waveform. Hey, yeah. Yep. That's the waveform, all right.